boys want to take me out tonight. But I'm doing this because I care. Yeah. Hi, it's Matthew. And today, I want to talk about pop stars. Pop stars are usually on the mind, and lately I've been thinking a lot, especially in relation to this class. And I've come to the conclusion that pop stars today are not just musicians anymore. They're lifestyle products, internet personalities, beauty standards, brand ambassadors, girlfriends, memes, aspirational fantasies. They're all these things all at once, and no current celebrity, in my opinion, seems to understand this balancing act more precisely than Sabrina Carpenter. And sure, at first glance, Sabrina Carpenter might seem like deceptively familiar. Blonde hair, glossy makeup, catchy looks, flirtatious lyrics, and hyper-feminine styling. She fits neatly into this lineage of American pop girls that audiences have already been culturally trained to recognize. Celebrity culture in America has never simply been about talent, though. It's about visibility, narrative, timing, marketability, cultural alignment, and most importantly, understanding what audiences want emotionally, aesthetically, and socially from a celebrity figure. Sabrina Carpenter succeeds because she understands the modern pop landscape exceptionally well, and not just musically, but culturally. She understands that contemporary stars are expected to be more than performers. They must simultaneously function as relatable personalities, aspirational beauty ideals, lifestyle brands, emotional confidants, and highly legible symbols of identity. And importantly, they must do all of this while appearing authentic. This is especially true for women in the industry. Modern women in pop music are expected to embody contradictions constantly. They must be sexy but self-aware, glamorous but relatable, confident but emotionally accessible, polished but seemingly effortless. And Sabrina Carpenter's persona is built almost entirely around navigating these contradictions successfully. Her sexuality feels playful rather than threatening. Her humor softens her image. Her femininity feels exaggerated yet approachable. Her branding feels hyper-curated while still appearing candid. And even her vulnerability arrives carefully packaged through irony and self-awareness just to give off that hint of relatability. Nothing about her celebrity persona feels accidental, and that precision is exactly why she's become such an effective case study for contemporary American celebrity culture. Because Sabrina Carpenter does not simply participate in pop culture, she reflects the exact systems that currently dominate it. And unlike earlier generations of pop stars, whose appeal was often built primarily around mystique or unattainability, Sabrina Carpenter's success relies heavily on controlled intimacy. Audiences are not simply meant to admire her, they're meant to quote her, dress like her, imitate her makeup, reference her humor, analyze her relationships, buy those products she endorses, and emotionally participate in the narratives she creates online. She's not just a celebrity, she's a framework that audiences can insert themselves into. And Sabrina Carpenter represents something larger than herself. She represents what American pop culture currently rewards in women: controlled authenticity, aesthetic consistency, consumer-friendly empowerment, participatory femininity, and self-aware desirability. In many ways, she's become the blueprint for what a Western pop diva looks like in the social media era, and understanding why helps us better understand the current state of celebrity culture itself. Simply stating, Sabrina works because she's for the girls, understates the amount of understanding, application, and commitment that's put into building that notion. So how did we get here? Because these expectations placed onto female celebrities today didn't appear out of nowhere. They're the result of decades of changing ideas surrounding femininity, empowerment, sexuality, agency, authenticity, and visibility in American culture. And importantly, these changes didn't just affect women socially, they transformed celebrity itself, especially the female pop star. Historically, female celebrities were often expected to fit into fairly rigid archetypes: the ingenue, the bombshell, the sweetheart, the diva. Their appeal relied heavily on fantasy and distance. Celebrities are meant to feel larger than life, inaccessible, almost mythological. But contemporary celebrity culture functions very differently. Today, audiences expect female celebrities to feel knowable. Not fully accessible, of course, but emotionally legible. We're expected to know their insecurities, their routines, their relationships, their humor, their trauma, their coffee order. Modern celebrity culture rewards women who can appear both aspirational and emotionally available at the same time. And to understand why, we need to briefly look at how feminism evolved alongside media culture in America. Second wave feminism often viewed traditional femininity critically. Beauty standards, makeup, hyperfemininity, even domestic aesthetics were frequently interpreted as extensions of patriarchal systems that encouraged women to prioritize appearance over autonomy. But by the 1990s, this relationship of femininity began to change. Third wave feminism complicated the idea that femininity itself was inherently oppressive. It was like, what if it wasn't? As theorist Deborah Siegel Snyder writes, it emphasizes an inclusive and non-judgmental approach and embraces femininity, beauty, culture, and sexuality rather than rejecting them outright. This distinction becomes incredibly important for understanding modern celebrity culture because once femininity becomes reclaimable, flexible, ironic, or self-authored, it also becomes highly marketable. As Snyder also writes, using makeup isn't a sign of our sway to the marketplace in the male gaze. It can be sexy, campy, ironic, or simply decorating ourselves. And this idea fundamentally reshaped the female celebrity. Femininity was no longer something celebrities needed to distance themselves from in order to appear intelligent, empowered, or culturally respectable. Instead, femininity became a form of cultural capital, something that could be stylized, curated, monetized, and pop music became one of the clearest places where this transformation played out publicly. Modern female pop stars are now expected to embody contradictions constantly, as we went over. Karen Sheehan writes, women performers continue to use their sexuality to gain fame and power, but these women are in no way portrayed as weak. They are seen as very strong women. In other words, contemporary female celebrities are expected to be independent, but desirable, sexual but not objectified, self-aware but not cynical, and above all, their femininity must feel intentional. Female celebrities are now expected to embody a very specific version of empowerment. And Sabrina Carpenter understands this exceptionally well because her appeal is not built around rejecting femininity, it's built around mastering it. Her hyperfemininity feels deliberate, curated, even referential. There's an old Hollywood quality to her image, the glamorous blonde bombshell, the flirtation, the polished beauty. But it's mixed with internet irony, self-awareness, and the kind of emotional accessibility that modern audiences now expect from celebrities. So she feels simultaneously nostalgic and contemporary, like a traditional American pop star reformatted for the social media era age. And this is exactly why Sabrina Carpenter works so effectively as a case study, because she reflects a broader shift in how female celebrities are now expected to function. Not simply as performers, but as fully consumable identity systems. This is where we begin to see how feminism becomes translated into celebrity branding. So, who's that femininity actually being designed for? Because in contemporary American celebrity culture, visibility is never neutral. Every aesthetic choice carries an assumed audience. Every performance implies a gaze. Historically, much of Western visual culture, from film to advertising to pop music, has been structured around what theorists describe as the male gaze. And in this framework, women are positioned primarily as objects of visual consumption. They are framed to be looked at, to be desired, and presented through a lens that assumes heterosexual male spectatorship as the default audience. And for a long time, this shaped how female pop stars were constructed. The bombshell archetype, the ingenue, the hypersexualized performer, even the girl next door image. These were all variations of femininity filtered through assumed male attention. But contemporary pop culture no longer operates on a single dominant gaze in the same way. Instead, what we're seeing now is a more complicated shift in audience orientation. One that internet discourse has increasingly tried to describe as the female gaze. Now, importantly, the female gaze is not a strict academic counterpart to the male gaze in the same structural sense. It's a looser, more culturally distributed, and often defined through contrast rather than formal theory. But in contemporary usage, It generally refers to a mode of representation that prioritizes emotional identification rather than visual possession, aesthetic detail rather than raw exposure, intimacy rather than distance, and participation rather than passive consumption. Or put more simply, the male gaze asks, who is she for? The female gaze asks, who is she and why? This distinction becomes especially visible in how audiences talk about modern female celebrities online. I was looking through Reddit and found this discussion post titled, "Why the fuck is Sabrina Carpenter related to the male gaze in any way?" Which I thought was funny and quite insightful. And going through the responses, there was quite some interesting back and forth. One user responds, "Female gaze doesn't mean no men find her sexually attractive. It means her aesthetic is primarily appealing to women." Another adds, "I think it's the excessive glam. Excessive glam usually repulses straight men, but women and gay men often find it aesthetically appealing." Another user agrees, "The girls in the gaze can appreciate good drag." What's important here is not just the conclusion, but the language being used, because what these responses are circling around without like necessarily naming it is that there's a shift away from this natural or effortless beauty ideal, and there's a shift towards something more constructed, more stylized, and knowingly performative. Even the comparison to drag is revealing, because drag at its core is not about pretending femininity is natural, it's about exaggerating it, it's about styling it and revealing it as a performance. And this is where Sabrina Carpenter becomes culturally legible within this framework. Her aesthetic is not built on visibility or effortlessness, it's built on hyper visibility, hyper styling, hyper femininity. Everything is intentional. The bows, the lingerie, the feminine silhouettes, the soft glam makeup, the blonde styling, the exaggerated cute but sexy coding. This intentionality is not meant to be read as artificial in a negative sense. It's meant to be read as labor, as attention, as craft. And this is where another Reddit interpretation becomes useful. One user compares this aesthetic logic to Legally Blonde, arguing that what women tend to find attractive is not minimalism or natural beauty, but unique, expressive, and well put together. This distinction matters because it reveals two different frameworks of desirability operating simultaneously. In one framework, traditionally associated with the male gaze, desirability is tied to effortlessness, the idea that beauty should appear natural, unconstructed, and lightly maintained. We can see this common beauty ideas of earlier decades, particularly in more modern notion that men prefer women who are natural, expressed through that saying, like, take a girl swimming on the first date, to imply that a man should be wary of too much makeup or hairstyling as to not be, like, catfished. Another framework, what online discourse is increasingly calling the female gaze, desirability is tied to visible intention, to detail, to styling, to expressive construction, and Sabrina Carpenter's image sits almost entirely within the second framework. If we understand Sabrina Carpenter as operating within a specific participatory, stylized form of femininity, then it becomes useful to compare her to another widely circulated figure in contemporary American celebrity culture. And my mind goes to Sydney Sweeney. Not because one is better or more culturally valuable than the other, but because they represent two distinct and completely different modes of female celebrity visibility. And obviously, there are similarities. They're both blonde and, like, popular now. Sydney Sweeney's public image is often framed through a more traditional visual logic of desirability. Her celebrity presence tends to emphasize physicality, like exposure, and embodied attractiveness in ways that align with older Hollywood conventions of the bombshell archetype. In this model, femininity is structured around the immediacy. She's meant to be seen, to be visually impactful. And importantly, this aligns more closely with a historically dominant mode of celebrity construction, one where female stars were positioned primarily as objects of visual consumption within a largely male-centered media framework. Sabrina Carpenter, by contrast, operates through a different logic entirely. Her image is not structured around immediacy, but around curation, where Sydney Sweeney's appeal is often discussed in terms of naturalism and physical embodiment. Sabrina Carpenter's appeal is rooted in styling, detail, and aesthetic intentionality. Everything about her presentation feels composed. bows, the lingerie, the silhouette, the soft glam, the hyper-coordinated tour aesthetics, even the way her humor is delivered in interviews, all of it contributes to a highly legible, carefully maintained visual identity. But again, the key distinction is not simply their visual style, it's audience orientation. Because what separates these two modes of celebrity isn't just how they look, but it's how they're meant to be consumed. Because Sydney Sweeney's image is often discussed in terms of being looked at, while Sabrina Carpenter's image is discussed in terms of being participated in. And this difference becomes especially visible in how audiences engage with each figure online. Sabrina Carpenter's aesthetic circulates as something to be replicated, referenced, and adopted. The makeup looks, the concert outfits, the pastel styling, the Sabrina-coded femininity that fans actively construct for themselves in digital spaces. Her celebrity does not just exist as a finished image, it exists as a template. Attractiveness is framed as something inherent, embodied, and visually immediate. Whereas Sabrina Carpenter's appeal is not structured around immediacy, it is structured around curation, detail, and instant recognizability. It is about understanding that contemporary audiences are not consuming femininity in a singular way anymore. They're consuming systems of femininity, different modes of presentation that signal different intended audiences, different cultural codes, and different forms of identification. And what makes Sabrina Carpenter especially significant in this landscape is that her femininity consistently signals participation rather than distance. It's not positioned as someone to simply look at. She's positioned as someone to inhabit, to reference, to mirror, to aesthetically reproduce, and that distinction is essential for understanding why she functions so effectively within a modern American pop culture. She helps define what kind of female celebrity is legible within the current moment of American pop culture. In a world inundated with pretty blonde girls in pastel vying to be the next pop it girl, how does Sabrina Carpenter maintain and build upon her celebrity status? Because Sabrina Carpenter's success is not just about aesthetic alignment with contemporary pop culture, it's also about the way she performs accessibility. In modern American celebrity culture, audiences increasingly expect female pop stars to feel knowable. Not entirely private, but emotionally legible. They're expected to be relatable without being ordinary, self-aware without being detached, vulnerable without being unstable, and authentic without being polished. This creates a very specific kind of performance required. One that's less about mystique and more about carefully managed transparency. And of course, when I say audiences, I'm mostly talking about women and gay men. Sabrina performs accessibility to a target audience and is very aware of this, stating in her interview with Gil King, "You don't have to like what I do. I'm okay if Tommy from Arkansas doesn't like what I do. As long as the people that I'm speaking to that do connect with me and relate to me feel that connection, then I'm happy." This statement is extremely revealing because it explicitly acknowledges audience segmentation. It suggests that her celebrity is not designed for universal approval, but for targeted resonance. She's not trying to appeal to everyone. She's trying to appeal to a specific demographic that already understands her language, her humor, and her aesthetic. And in contemporary pop culture, that's gold. Accessibility is currency. Celebrity success is increasingly built on precision targeting rather than mass appeal. How else will you cement yourself in a place at the table when there's never been as many celebrities and influencers and ways to become one as there is right now? Sabrina Carpenter understands this logic intuitively. Her humor plays a central role in maintaining her controlled accessibility. She frequently frames her comedic voice as self-aware and slightly self-deprecating, describing it as something that comes from a dark place. My humor is such a huge part of how I'm able to cope with anything I'm dealing with. What matters here is not necessarily the content of the humor itself, while that will come into play later, but it's its function. Because humor in Sabrina Carpenter's public persona consistently operates as a softening mechanism. It allows sexual lyrics to feel playful rather than provocative. It allows emotional themes to feel conversational rather than confessional, and allows her public image to remain approachable even when engaging in highly stylized or provocative pop aesthetics. Even her songwriting, particularly in tracks that rely heavily on irony or exaggerated sexual humor, reinforce this dynamic. When she jokes in interviews about lyrical content, treating relationships, attraction, or frustration with exaggerated sarcasm, It creates a consistent impression that her persona is always like in on the joke and in on itself. And this sense of irony is crucial because it stabilizes her public image within the demands of contemporary celebrity culture and like feminism. It prevents her femininity from being read as purely consumptive or purely performative. Instead, it becomes something that feels managed, reflective, and self aware. Still, Sabrina knows that some people will view her performance as performative and even anti feminist for her embracing of crude humor and sexual agency. She did have quite the major controversy for her most recent album cover for Man's Best Friend album. She tells Interview Magazine, "There's a lot of nuance to this, and I'm not naive to that. But I feel like, why is this taboo? This is something that women experience in such a real way, becoming comfortable with themselves and who they are. There's so many reasons why I called it Man's Best Friend, and there's so many layers in the experiences that I was going through at the time where emotionally I felt like one. I'm really, really grateful that there's enough of my audience that really knows me as a person that will be able to hear these songs how they're intended. It's always going to be up to interpretation, and I understand that, but I'm glad you like my sexual content." She goes into explain about some of her more directly raunchy lyrics. Sometimes people hear the lyrics that are really bold, or they go, "I don't want to sing this in front of other people, it's TMI." But I think about being at a concert with however many young women in the front row that are screaming at the top of their lungs with their best friends. We can all sigh in relief. This is just fun, and that's all it has to be. This brings me to the participation and how integral it is to the audience experience in a world that prizes parasocial relationships. Sabrina's a pop star, sure, but she's also a lifestyle system. In a modern American celebrity culture, the boundaries between artist, brand, and aesthetic have become increasingly blurred. Celebrities are no longer consumed only through their music, films, or performances. They're consumed through their lifestyle coherence. Their image extends into fashion, beauty, food, social media presence, and even the kinds of spaces and products that they're associated with. And Sabrina Carpenter is a particularly clear example of this. Her celebrity identity does not remain confirmed to her discography. It expands outward into a fully legible aesthetic ecosystem. There are pastel-coded visuals, the soft glam makeup style, the blonde, highly maintained hair identity, the corset-inspired silhouettes and hyper-feminine styling, the carefully curated, cute but suggestive visual language, and importantly, all of this remains consistent across every platform she occupies. Music videos, live performances, interviews, brand deals, and social media circulation. This consistency is not incidental, it's foundational to her celebrity readability. As one media commentator describes her visual identity, she reads as a little Polly Pocket Bratz diva star. And that framing is revealing because it situates her not just as a performer, but as a composite aesthetic object, one that merges childhood-coded femininity, hyper-pop glamour, and stylized adult sexuality into a single, recognizable brand language. In that sense, Sabrina Carpenter is not simply a celebrity you observe. She's a celebrity you can recognize instantly, even in fragments. A hairstyle, a color palette, a pose, a lyric, a tone, a silhouette. This kind of recognizability is central to contemporary pop stardom because in the attention economy, clarity is value, and Sabrina Carpenter's brand is extremely legible. But what makes this system especially powerful is that it does not stop at recognition. It extends into participation. I want to take a second to talk about her live shows, and those are what really made me feel this. Because being a charting pop star is like one feat, but to be a touring artist who sells out arenas is another. And Sabrina utilizes her curated aesthetic to bolster her live shows as a hyper-feminine space where a community of girlhood is championed. A media and culture commentator on YouTube that goes by Art at Midnight states about Carpenter, "She has a clear signature style, and this makes her memorable. You can easily pick her out as the tiny girl in the pastel-colored lingerie and platform boots. This is so helpful with community building. Fans know exactly how to dress for a tour." And I can personally vouch for this. I remember walking towards the now crypto.com arena and seeing like so many girls just dressed in sequin and lace and heart motifs, and they were just like so happy to be there. And the feminine energy was like palpable. This positions her further toward the female gaze as it fits in the lane of aspiration. Girls love Sabrina Carpenter because she emulates so wholly and unapologetically what it is to be a girl today. Sabrina describes herself as young womaning the way I need to young woman. She's articulating something that resonates far beyond her individual experience, because modern celebrity culture often demands that female stars turn their personal development into narrative content. Growth becomes visible, emotionality becomes aesthetic, and mistakes become part of the brand. In this context, Sabrina Carpenter is not just performing femininity, she's performing the process of becoming legible as a woman within a public space. And that process itself becomes consumable. Because engaging with Sabrina Carpenter is not only about listening to her music, it's about participating in a broader aesthetic system that signals belonging, taste, and cultural awareness within online femininity spaces. Her brand collaborations further reinforce this structure. Her presence in mainstream consumer culture through like beauty, branding, fashion campaigns, her coffee collaborations with like Dunkin' extends her visibility beyond music into everyday lifestyle and environments. I mean, she's been doing so much lately. She had her Pringles Super Bowl commercial, two Dunkin' collaboration drinks, her Redkins hair ad, and the Skims collaboration. And all of these are so intertwined with her brand that we've been talking about so far. Everything works together and fits together and bolsters this space of femininity for girls to aspire. Those collabs aren't random endorsements. They function as extensions of her aesthetic identity into consumable, repeatable formats. They make her image something that can be tasted, worn, replicated, and performed. And this is central to how modern celebrity operates, because the contemporary pop star is no longer just a cultural figure. They're a distribution system for identity. Sabrina Carpenter's success illustrates this clearly. Her femininity is not positioned as distant or unattainable, it's positioned as accessible, reproducible, and participatory. It is participation in femininity as a consumed experience. Girlhood in this system is no longer only a developmental stage or a personal identity. It becomes an aesthetic category that can be purchased, replicated, and circulated, whether that be good or bad. And Sabrina Carpenter exists at the center of that transformation. Sabrina Carpenter does not simply exist within celebrity culture, she reflects its current logic back to the audience in an especially legible form. In this system, femininity is no longer just a personal identity or aesthetic choice, it becomes a cultural language, one that can be stylized, circulated, replicated, and monetized. And celebrity itself is no longer a stable category of fame, it's an ongoing process of interpretation, a continuous negotiation between visibility and control, intimacy and distance, performance and perceived authenticity. I really loved that book, The Image. I literally bought a copy. The theoretical frameworks discussed throughout this whole video and what we've been talking about, whether feminism, gaze theory, or media criticism, are not treated as standalone explanations for Sabrina Carpenter's popularity. Instead, they function as tools for understanding the broader cultural conditions that shape how she's produced and consumed. Because ultimately, Sabrina Carpenter is not an anomaly. She's not an exception to celebrity culture. She's a highly optimized expression of it. Her persona fits cleanly into what contemporary American media environments currently reward in female celebrities: relatability without instability, sexuality without rupture, authenticity without messiness, and identity that feels both curated and emotionally candid and accessible. And perhaps most importantly, she embodies a shift in what celebrity itself has become. No longer a distant figure to be admired from afar, but a participatory system audiences are invited to enter, interpret, and reproduce. In that sense, Sabrina Carpenter is not just a product of modern celebrity culture, she's a demonstration of it completely. And understanding her success ultimately means understanding the cultural logic that produces all contemporary celebrity figures in the first place. Because what she reveals is not just how one pop star operates in the present moment, it is how American celebrity culture now functions as a whole. I chose Sabrina Carpenter because I have quite a natural obsession with her, but I didn't expect to dive as deeply into academia as I did, the celebrity culture of it all. There was so much to unpack once I started, so this was very fun.